All right. Well, let's get to our time of the podcast every week. We're gonna do a little extrapolation. As you know, DoorDash is the proud sponsor of the Nation Network of podcasts, restaurants, and more delivered right to your door. And for the first time, we're going to do a mailbag. So we could call it the DoorDash mailbag until someone comes along and wants to sponsor the mailbag specifically. So just throwing that out there. I'd like to wave the flag. But we got some really good questions. Do you want me to start?
Oh, go right ahead, because I think it's appropriate here. I tell you, actually, let me pose this question to you, Scott, because you do cover the Carolina Hurricanes.
I do provide content.
You do. And, they're called a small market team, but the Green Bay Packers play in an even smaller city, yet have a huge nationwide following. Are the NHL and its media partners underestimating the Canes' ability to grow a fan base outside of North Carolina if promoted properly on national television? What an opening salvo. What a question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really valid question. And I think we've seen, Carolina is now on the cusp, and it's a legitimate question to ask because they're a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. Went to a conference final in 19, been to the playoffs 2021. And I think I go back to when Tampa was, sort of on their rise before winning back to back. I think there was still that, there were questions asked from that fan base as well. Hey, what about us? We have the best team in the NHL. Does anyone care? Or, part of it is, and I'm not gonna dump on NBC Sports or NBC, who was their broadcast partner in the States for whatever it was, a decade or whatever, 12, whatever the number of years was. Mm-hmm. But I do think there was a complete staleness because every week there'd be Rangers, Chicago, Washington, Pittsburgh. And it didn't matter that the Rangers sucked and Detroit sucked and Chicago sucked. It did not matter. They still trotted those teams out on their national broadcast because that's what the numbers tell them. So I do think that with ESPN and Turner, I think there has to be a recognition that the marketplace is different, right? Like you have to recognize where the buzz is. And again, I provide content to the Canes, and having spent time there, that fan base is really quite incredible, and they're very sophisticated. And the marketing group with the Carolina Hurricanes is so in tune, right? They have a sense of humor. They can poke fun at themselves. That fan base is completely galvanized. And I think there's a similar kind of dynamic in Nashville. You talk about that outdoor game, and you always wonder, geez, that's the 62,000, that's a lot of tickets to sell. Tampa, Nashville. Nashville's a great hockey town. And it's a great hockey town because the organization has made it so. They've committed money to building rinks, and they support high school hockey and diversity, all those things. And the Canes are very much like that. So I do think I think the profile of Carolina Hurricanes is at a point now that maybe it's never been at. And that includes, winning a cup in 2006. I think it may be different in Carolina than it's ever been. And I think there are a whole bunch of factors in that. But do you believe that? Like you are multimedia. You talk about hockey on multiple platforms every day. Do you think the Canes are where they should be in terms of buzz, in terms of league-wide recognition?
I think the Canes are just really well liked across the league. Yeah. Oddly enough, for a team that's just been a bunch of jerks and needled everybody, I think people love it. And it shows to me how wearing the black hat and being the villain and being the heel can be so attractive. Because for every person out there that can't stand Brad Marchand, there's 3 that love him.
Yeah.
And it's intense on both sides. And that's great. There's nothing worse than being blah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, man, some teams just don't have an identity. They don't have an edge. Like, you have to have that in today's world, and you have to present it on social, on your broadcast. I mean, you watch the broadcast for Carolina, man, Trip Tracy's so fun. Like,
yeah,
he's excellent. And that matters. Your broadcast team matters.
Yeah.
So I think that Carolina, to me, I don't think they can turn into Green Bay Packers. I do think they're a team, though, that has probably been undervalued for a long time. Yeah. I don't think they're going to fill that building every single day. It just isn't really how it works until playoff time there. But if you ever go to a game and see the passion and the tailgating and everything, it's real. It's just a hard market to sell it consistently at a sellout pace until you get to playoff time.
Yeah.
So,
I think, they're not, they are a fascinating place. And it's interesting because they're one of those places that, even though their arena is not downtown, it actually fits the community, because that community wants a big, wide open space. They do tailgate like crazy. I did stories back during that 06 run and talked to people about the tailgating, because it was a novelty, really. And I was at the National Post or wherever I was, or maybe it was ESPN by that point. Because it was still sort of a novelty. The same people tailgating in the exact same spots. They've got married and had kids, and their life has happened to them, and they're still tailgating in the same spots. And it fits that marketplace. And I think that's okay. I'm looking forward to their outdoor game next year, right across the parking lot at Carter Finley Stadium. So that'll be kind of fun. And I expect it'll be very much like what we saw in Nashville, right? I think it'll be a great party. All right. So my turn to ask you, part of the Suitcase and the Scribe mailbag. The Avalanche are a good team. Yes, they are. But after watching them a few times, seems like they could use some playoff veterans in the bottom six. What about, and could you see a Cal Clutterbuck or a Zach Parise as a fit? What do you think? I think that's a great question. Given we were talking about the West being very fluid, but Colorado's going to run away with it. They're going to be the number one seed. But what do you like about them come playoff time, or do you have some concerns?
Well, I think Brian G on Twitter has been reading my mind. I think that if Carolina needs anything, it's not Claude Giroux. It's not a goaltender. I think they just need some grittiness and some depth, and they need to do it without giving up an Alex Newhook or young talent on that team. You have to keep him. And, Darren Helm's there, which is great. You talk about experience, somebody who plays and do anything you need for a club, but I think he needs some support there. Clutterbuck, Parise. Listen, I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen out of Long Island. That's the hard part. You never know with Lou Lamoriello, because he keeps everything so close to his vest. And does Zach Parise, they're so close. Does he want to go anywhere? I don't know. I look at Brandon Hagel in Chicago. Boy, that'd be a good one to get in there, but you'd have to give up a decent amount of picks to get him, I believe, because his contract is so good for the next couple of years. So that's the tough part, because you're probably looking at a rental, I would imagine, for the Avalanche in my eyes. Yeah. And I think Parise or Clutterbuck might fit that bill. Clutterbuck, I would say more so than Parise, because they don't need the extra scoring. They could really use some grind and some bang and some grit there. So I like Clutterbuck. I think there's other players amongst the league that could fit that role. But you're going to have to data mine them and figure out who's the proper fit, because to me, that's the only thing missing for that team. Just a little bit of grit and some control. I'd like to see them be in control when things go sideways, which is never. So except for last night, not great. So here's the question: is after Joe Sakic stole Devin Taves from the Islanders, I don't know, maybe lose a little bit gun shy about going back to that. I agree. Well,
that was not a great deal for the Islanders, that's for sure. And what a great deal for the Avs. And I think it's a fair. I think this is the great dilemma for Joe Sakic, right? Because they're soon going to be in a position like Tampa was back in 19. Where they are going to run away with the West. They're probably going to run away with the President's Trophy. The internal urgency is going to be the issue for Jared Bednar there. And listen, we all know what happened with the Bolts against Columbus after that record-setting 62-win season. And John Cooper spoke about it very candidly after. We couldn't get our foot back on the gas, right? it's a natural thing. No one's touching you. You're trying to manage, maybe you're managing minutes and you're doing things because there's no urgency to your game. And how do you recreate that? And that series against Vegas last year in the second round was fascinating because Vegas just wore them down. The Avs had that series well in hand, couldn't close the deal. And maybe that's a lesson in itself. Maybe you learn from that and you don't need to do too much else. But I think the question is a great one because I think I think Cal Clutterbuck, I saw our friend Larry Brooks in New York covers the Rangers, talking about, is Cal Clutterbuck the kind of guy that the Rangers could use? Because he is that kind of guy that can come in and just a little, it's like he's Barclay Goodrow, but older and not as expensive probably. So
yeah,
I don't know.
And that's where I think the one part of the question that I don't necessarily think is that important, somebody who has playoff experience. You don't have to have that. You have to play the right way. It's got to be the right fit. That's a bonus if there already is playoff experience. We got another one in from a great screen name. I Will Dance You. Okay. This is Mikey on Twitter. And he asked, what's one player that could be moved at the deadline that nobody's talking about? Do you have an inside track on somebody you think that could fit that bill, Scott?
I should have looked at these more closely before we started because do you have one? Because I will think about it. Because I think
have one.
Do it.
I have
then,
one.
Yeah.
Ryan Getzlaf.
I will come up with one.
Ryan Getzlaf.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Not a big contract, proven winner, still got some legs in him. You could hide him on your fourth line, wheel him out for the power play. He's seen his buddy Corey Perry do it the last couple of years.
Yes. Yeah.
I know that heard rumblings that even last year at the deadline, maybe even Vegas had gone after Getzlaf and couldn't make it work. So I don't know. I wonder about him. I don't think anybody's really making much waves there, but if Anaheim's not in a better position in a couple of weeks here, maybe they have that conversation.
Yeah, you know what? Here's the guy that I'm, and I like that idea. It was one of those conversations that came up last year because Getzlaf is such a good guy and his experience and all that kind of stuff, and I think he'd be a fit. And he plays center, so he goes where you want him to go in your lineup. And I think that there are lots of teams that would love to have a little center depth. I will throw this name out there. And I know Frank Cervalli had talked about the New Jersey Devils earlier in the week on one of the other platforms here at Daily Faceoff. But the guy no one talks about PK Subban anymore unless they complain that he's slew footing people.
Yeah.
But he's at the end of his deal. He's making $9 million, so that's a lot. But Devils retain salary. I don't think he has any trade protection. Let's just confirm that. No trade protection.
Maybe a third-party broker comes in.
Yeah.
You could make this work if you wanted to.
See, here's the thing. I know PK Subban's a polarizing guy in the NHL, and there's certain amount of.
Not for me. Good hockey player, man.
Well,
but I understand the impression. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and no, I think there's. Anyway, the guy's won a Norris Trophy. He still can skate like the wind. If you're a team that is looking for some help on the back end, you don't necessarily need a guy to play 25 minutes, but maybe it's a complementary piece on the back end. You're right. What's the ask for PK Subban? Because I can't imagine he's coming back to the Devils. So that's my guy. That's how I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to say PK Subban. I don't know where he would go. Where is the fit there? We're
going to break it. He's going to the Leafs. He's going home.
Oh my God. Wouldn't that be glorious? Huh?
Oh man.
Listen, at least I'm not sure they need PK Subban per se. I mean, with Jake Muzzin, concussion issues, I think they're thinking more along, that more physical, lower profile guy, who can play in that 4-5-6 role.
But is that not kind of what PK is now?
I think in a short period of time, PK Subban could be an absolutely fascinating trade deadline acquisition for a contending team. What about the Minnesota Wild? Listen, Minnie's got all kinds of cap room. They need to, I think Bill Guerin's going to be aggressive. Probably would prefer to add a top 6 forward, but I don't know. Why not? I don't know. Why not? Yeah. So there you go. We'll go circle back and make a note. What about PK? All right. What I got one for you here. This will pretty much close things out, which is I've enjoyed this. It's very, very fun. Which teams do you see making the largest splash at the trade deadline? I think who are you looking forward to over the next 3 weeks to be the most active?
Yeah, we got to look at this in 2 ways. Who's going to be most active and who's going to go get the big name player?
Yes, 2 things.
It is.
Possibly.
In terms of teams being active, I cannot see the New York Rangers standing pat. Right. I can't. Shesterkin has covered up the defensive deficiencies of that team more than anybody can realize unless you watch Georgiev play. Yeah. Then you realize what that team really is. So I think the Rangers are going to be looking for depth in a lot of ways. I think that's a team that could go either way. They could go for the big splash, or they could go for several moves or a combination thereof. Yep. The sneaky team to me is actually Carolina, because they know they can win, and can they make an addition that'll do it? I just don't expect it to be the high profile players. That would actually really surprise me, even though I wouldn't count it out. So I think the Rangers are the team for me to keep an eye on at the deadline. And we've mentioned Minnesota. Yes, I think that Guerin will attempt to be aggressive. I wouldn't be surprised there. But I'm very, very curious about LA. I know we mentioned them earlier. Yep. They have so many prospects. They have attractive pieces that could go the other direction, and they're very close. If you're looking for a big splash team, I think they might be the undercover one where Rob Blake's got something up his sleeve here he's trying to pull off. It's just a hunch. But boy, can you imagine if he was able to pull off a Chikrin move or something of that caliber? Yeah. That would change the complexion of that team. And they might be the one club with the prospects and picks to be able to pull that off if necessary.
Yeah. I agree with all those teams. Minnesota's, I think they'll take a swing, because next year is when they start to pay the cap price for buying out Ryan Suter and Zach Parise. I'm curious about the Boston Bruins, though. Sort of the team that, people, Tuukka Rask, he abandons the comeback, and they're sort of a little bit under the radar, but they played pretty well. See the Jake DeBrusk with the hat trick apparently still wants out of Boston.
Yeah, he still wants out. Now he's playing on the top line, though. He's playing with Bergeron and Marchand on the right side. You might want to rethink that now, man. That might be your ticket to $5 million every year, dude. Like, Swayman's playing incredible in net for them.
Yes.
But they're still missing pieces.
They're still missing pieces. And again, the Bruins are now in that same sort of discussion, I think, that we put Washington and Pittsburgh in. Like Patrice Bergeron, instant Hall of Famer. Obviously, Marchand is the same, frankly. I think, different player, obviously. But I think if you're Boston, you have to think, okay, what do we owe it to Bergeron and this core to take a mighty swing? It's not really, Don Sweeney's managed the cap so nicely in Boston, but they need some help. And I wonder if they're a team that could slide into some of these discussions on some of these top end players. I mean, how nice would Claude Giroux look in the top 6 in Boston, and, changes that team, anyway, I'm curious about Boston over the next 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, they've gotten great goaltending lately. I mean, Swayman was goalie of the month, I believe he was just named, I want to say.
Yeah, rookie of the month or goalie of the month?
Rookie of the month, I guess it was. I got this wrong on it, but man, he has been lights out for them in the last, let's just say this. Since the Tuukka Rask experiment and Jeremy Swayman going down to the American Hockey League and him coming back, he's been outstanding. He's allowed 5 goals in his last 6 games, 2 shutouts. He looks like the real deal. And I've got a good friend of mine is Alfie Michaud, who was my goalie coach with the Portland Pirates one year. He's now the assistant / goalie coach for the Maine Black Bears, where Swayman played. And he said that Swayman is his biggest asset is his belief in himself.
Yep.
But he backs it up by doing the homework. Okay. Like, he loves doing video. He loves searching for the little extra things that he can find to be better about. And I said, hey, you know, I find he gets a little wide and he doesn't rotate because of that. Sometimes he goes, he's working on it.
Yeah.
And to me, that shows a goalie that's a student. I've always liked him.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure he was ready at the start of the year, but his game's grown. And Ullmark's struggled lately.
Yeah.
Swayman's a guy there now. And good on him. His numbers have been phenomenal everywhere he's played. That's indicative of somebody who's always learning. Student, truly a student of the position. I'm curious to see where he can carry that team to, because they needed that. And now I think the team believes in him, Scott.
Yeah. He was rookie of the month, by the way. So that was
rookie of the month. Thank you very much.
No, that's good.